The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
So in States 270, can you tell us what we're looking at here?
So on the top graph, that is charting the heart rate logged by her watch. This is from the time frame of 9:08 and 30 seconds on February 22nd, 2024 until the time 9:15 and 30 seconds. And the bottom chart is graphing the location tracked speed of her movement during that time frame.
And why did you break it down into just this basically 7-minute time frame?
Simply for visual purposes. During the entire run that was logged on her watch, it tracked a data point every second that day. So there were over 33,300 data points set and recorded and extracted. So if we put that entire data set in a chart like this to fit on this one piece of paper, it would essentially be a flat line. So we basically just select a time frame that shows some pertinent data. That way we can visually see the peaks and valleys included in the chart in the data set.
So and looking at States 270, can you tell us, first of all, what was Laken's speed and her heart rate at 9:08 a.m.?
So at 9:08, so right at the start, okay.
Yes.
It's hard to read on mine as well. So heart rate at that time was 156, so that's beats per minute for the heart rate. The speed was at, and it tracks in meters per second, to be clear. It's 2.65 is what's logged on the chart. For conversion's sake, that'll go over to 5.9 miles per hour. And for running purposes, that's a 10.2 minute mile.
What about the next data point for speed, which is 2.97? Is that faster than the previous one?
That is moving faster than the previous data point. So 2.97 meters per second. Again, comes down to up to 6.6 miles per hour, or just over a 9-minute mile.
And that particular speed, 2.97, is that the fastest that you see on her run that day?
The fastest was right at the beginning of the run.
Okay.
So that was around just after 9:03. You'll see that on the
States
next.
271?
Correct. Yeah.
So her fastest was 3.45?
3.45, 7.7 miles per hour, about a 7-minute 47 mile.
Michael, this is hard testimony to hear. Granted, it's not a jury trial. The judge is listening to it, but to hear, you can imagine running along with her at 9:03, the fastest speed, 9:08. She's still running a 10.2-minute mile on her heart rate as he continues, I'm sure, to describe what happens as she gets attacked.
Yeah, it really creates this three-dimensional picture of the victim when you can really hone in on exactly what she was doing, exactly how fast she was running, and how it was all stopped by allegedly this defendant.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Very compelling testimony. We'll hit the pause button when we come back. We'll get you back in for more of the testimony. Stay tuned.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Michael Ayala here with Judge Ashley Hinkle. I want to get you back now to testimony in the bench trial for Jose Ibarra. He's the Georgia man charged in the killing of nursing student Laken Riley earlier this year.
And right now, we are hearing from a digital forensics expert testifying about the data extracted from Riley's phone and watch. He's describing how fast she was running at 9:08 a.m. the day of the murder. We're picking it up right where we left off.
So going back to States 270, we were at, is that at 9:09 a.m. that it is at 2.97?
A little bit after that. I could give you the exact time if I had a minute to dig through the log, but it's shortly after 9:09.
At some point, we can continue to go along this track.
Okay.
But in States 270, did you also note at the time that Laken Riley called 911 from her phone?
Yes, and that's the vertical reference lines you see. Those are reference lines that we pulled over from the phone log data. So at the time the 911 call was placed. That was the actual call went out at 9:11:06. That's that third vertical line you see on the graph.
That's when the call went out, but did she attempt to make it sooner than that?
Yes.
So I want to talk to you about two things. At some point in State's Exhibit 270, did Laken Riley come to a complete stop?
Yes.
What was the time that she came to a complete stop?
So the speed went to 0. I think that's notated on the third. Yeah, so on the third chart we have here, 272, is that what it'd be? Comes to a complete stop. Oh, nope, sorry. That was the heart rate.
How about State's 271?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I thought I had it written down. Yep, wrong chart. So yeah, 9:10:44 was the time the speed went to 0.
What time did she attempt to start making that 911 call?
So the phone logged the phone call application, so the internal phones application started to recognize an attempt to place a call at 9:10:50. That's the second vertical line.
So for record purposes, 9:10:40 to 9:10:50 is how much time?
That'd be 6 seconds.
No.
No, 40 or 44?
Right, it's 9:10 and 44 seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's the speed 0.
Okay.
And then,
tell me the 911 SOS application. I want to ask you questions about that too, but tell me that time.
So the SOS, we initially saw that occur at 9:10 and 39 seconds. And that's not referenced on this chart.
Okay, so how much time differentials between those two events, from the time that she comes to a complete stop and the time that she does the SOS function?
So the SOS function was actually initially applied prior to coming to a stop.
Okay, so tell us about that.
So
I'm just looking for the time between the two.
Right.
All right.
And I'm just trying to figure out exactly from what point you're talking.
All
so
right.
yeah, 9:10:39, we saw the SOS feature on the phone initially be activated. And by activation, the phone is just recognizing some way to initiate the SOS. There's multiple ways to do it. Long press or 2-button side press. So the side button is a volume button. You can long press that, it'll initiate. From the lock screen, you can hit the emergency call and it'll bring up a dial pad. Then there's other features that have to be enabled that we did not see enabled on her phone. So when you see that SOS folder created at 9:10:39, we believe and we understand at that time is when we saw the SOS starting to become manipulated. Then what we see after the speed went to 0 with the phone call app intent to call, that's when the phone application is starting to recognize, hey, I need to start waking up to place a phone call. So from the 9:10:39 when SOS was activated to 9:10:50 when the phone application recognized, you're looking at 11 seconds from those 2 points. The 9:10:50 was 6 seconds after she stopped. So that was the phone call the phone being recognized that it needs to place a call occurred 6 seconds after she came to a complete stop. And then the phone call finally went out at 9:11:06, which would be, what's that? 44, 20, mental math. 44, 54, 22 seconds from the speed 0 to phone call out.
Okay. So it took the phone a minute, well, not even a minute, a few seconds to recognize the SOS function and actually make the call.
Right.
Do you know how that works on an iPhone to enable an SOS function to make an emergency 911 call?
Yes.
Can you show us if I hand you my iPhone on the stand? Show us how that works, and you can show the cord.
All right,
How do you do that?
So from the lock screen, we would swipe, you get your unlocked dial pad, and then from here, and then from here you would get the emergency button at the bottom. Hit that, and that will load a dial pad. From there, you would dial 911.
Incredible. It's just incredible what these machines can do. Let's bring back in our guest with us, criminal defense attorneys Jack Rice, Josh Schiffer. And Josh, I'll start with you. What's really remarkable about it, again, it's probably fairly simple technology. Not simple for us. It's not what we do. But at the end of the day, what it's allowed us to do, at least as I listen to the testimony, is almost feel like I'm on the run with her. You know, as she starts at 9:03, she's feeling good. She's at a 7-minute mile pace. Then she slows down and settles into her 10-minute per mile pace. I mean, you feel like you're actually on the run with her. It's really amazing.
Yeah. I can't tell you the first thing about how the technology works. It's magic. There are little squirrels and gnomes hiding in this thing in my pocket. But it's super intimate. Come on. Who do you know that hasn't used a fitness tracker or, you know, the information, these phones that we willingly give up and collect because it's so good for us. And now when we see it recounted like this, something that is so intimate, literally, her phone was in her pocket all the time. Apple Watches, this technology, it's part of our daily, minute-by-minute existence. Then to see it used in a sadly clinical, but uncontroversial, unambiguous way. We look at this, and this is information jurors can go, nope, I know how that works. Yeah, I use that all the time. I've fought with it, I've loved it, I've cursed it, but yeah, I know what it is. And that... I'm telling you, judges like, hey man, as this technology, even I understand. And judges typically aren't pro-technology, but this, it's a layup.
Yeah, it's a layup, Jack. It is really hard to listen to. But listen, if you believe crime of opportunity, because by all accounts, this alleged murder, didn't know her at all, but yet it sounds like it wasn't just a crime of opportunity. He had to be lying away around waiting and watching because nobody came upon them. She's running on a trail where lots of people run and then suddenly stops and nobody sees anything.
Absolutely. That is what makes this equally horrifying. But to really follow up on what Josh is talking about, you know, the trick with any fact finder, whether it is the judge or the jury, is that you have to pull them out of the confines of the courtroom, of the jury box, of the bench. And you want to take them out in the street. You want to take them to this campus, down this street, down this walkway, down this dirt path. Because if you can put them side by side, you are viscerally moving them, and that is the trick.
Yeah, and they have done that. All right, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Jack Rice and Josh Schiffer, for joining us both this hour.
Folks, stick around because coming up, more testimony in the murder of Laken Riley case for Jose Ibarra. We'll be right back, so keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
I want to get you back into court now. A digital forensics examiner is still on the stand. He's testifying about extracting information from Laken Riley's phone. Let's get back for his direct examination.
Place the call. It's one way.
Okay, what's the other way?
That's the most familiar way for most people with their phone. So from an iPhone, you can select the side button and a volume button, hold, and it brings up the emergency option from that phone, from that display.
And so for the record, did you hold the two side buttons down simultaneously?
Correct.
For that screen to appear?
For this screen to appear.
Okay.
So that's one way. And then if you let go, you'll feel it vibrate. It vibrated in my hand when it brought this screen up. You would slide to place the call. Then on the newer iPhones, hers was a 15 Pro Max, so the latest at the time, if you continue to hold, it will then start a countdown. And it'll go 8-second countdown, and then it'll start vibrating, sounding an alarm, and then place the call automatically. But you have to continue to hold after this screen displays for it to do that.
So there are a few ways that
Correct.
you could do it.
Correct.
Do you know from examining, thank you, I'll take my phone back. Do you know from examining Laken Riley's phone which method of SOS 911 calling she used?
So from what we have seen and been able to determine, it appears that the dial pad was used.
And I want to talk to you about her heart rate continuation. So
Okay.
I'm going to show you back to State's Exhibit 271. Can you tell us the top graph? What does that depict?
So the top graph in red is the heart rate data, and that's from the time 9:03:42, which also coincided with the beginning of the tracked activity being the run. and it runs to 9:33:59. And again, this is February 2nd, 2024.
When did her heart rate drop to 0?
So it went to 0 at 9:28 and 23 seconds.
And did it remain 0? And I want to show you 272. Tell us what we're looking at 272.
So 272 is the heart rate from that same beginning time, 9:03 and 42 seconds. And it's tracking all the way to 12:59 and 59 seconds, February 22nd, 24.
And at some point, we see the 0 at 9:28, like you told us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see what looks like her heart rate going back up at 12:37.
Yes.
What, does that coincide with the CPR?
That coincides with CPR and is tracked based on the body cam footage from our officer arriving on scene.
So if you look at Officer Maxwell's body cam footage, which we've already looked at,
correct.
At 12:37 p.m., he attempts CPR, Miss Riley, is that right?
That's correct.
And that caused, you were able to see that in the Garmin watch?
Yes.
All right. Between the 9:28 a.m. and when Officer Maxwell shows up at the scene, is there any movement in her heart rate?
No.
It remains 0.
Correct.
All right.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
When you conducted testing from the cutting of the jacket, that would have been traditional DNA?
Yes.
What were your results?
There was a partial major profile obtained from the cutting from the jacket, and that matched the profile of Laken Riley. There was also a partial minor profile obtained from the cutting from the blue jacket, and that matched the profile of Jose Antonio Ibarra. There are 2 people contributing to this DNA profile.
Now, since this is a mixture of 2 people, why didn't this go to true allele? Why were you able to do traditional DNA testing on this jacket cutting?
We are able to use other methods to separate mixtures into individual contributor genotypes, which is necessary in order for us to say whether a reference sample matches or not. Sometimes we can't separate mixtures into individual contributor genotypes, so that is when we use the software program.
Okay. So do you have a threshold at the GBI in which you send items to true allele versus dealing with them in traditional DNA?
Correct.
Okay. And so the cutting from the jacket, did it fall below the threshold where you had to send it to true allele, or was it above the threshold so you could keep traditional DNA?
It was above that threshold, so yes.
Right. And so did you assign a frequency for the partial profile of Jose Antonio Ibarra for the jacket?
Yes, the partial minor profile was 1 in 9 billion individuals.
Okay. And this mixture of Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra on the jacket cuttings, just the 2 of them?
Yes.
And prior to, I guess I should ask you this, did you obtain or did you have at the laboratory known DNA samples of Laken Riley?
Yes.
Known DNA sample of Jose Ibarra?
Yes.
Known DNA sample of Diego Ibarra?
Yes.
And known DNA sample of Argenis Ibarra?
Yes.
Okay. The jacket, does that complete the traditional DNA results on the jacket cutting?
There was a probability for the match to Laken Riley.
If you could give us that too.
1 in 10 quintillion individuals.
Okay. What about the contact swabs on the jacket? What were your results for that? Were you able to do traditional DNA, or did you have to go to true allele?
Those were a complex mixture that had to go to true allele.
And what were your results? And tell us, for your first true allele results, we're not going to repeat it for every item. How did you move on to the next step for the contact swabs for the blue jacket into true allele? What was that process? What did you do?
The true allele process consists of using the electronic files that are generated by the genetic analyzer, as well as controls that we use in the testing. They are uploaded into a software program. I determine the number of contributors I believe is in a mixture, and then the software performs calculations to assign probabilities for genetic combinations at each of these 21 locations along the DNA strand for each contributor. And at the end, those possible genotypes are compared to a reference sample, and a likelihood ratio is given in the form of a match statistic.
What in general is a likelihood ratio?
Likelihood ratio is a ratio of probabilities. The probabilities of seeing the mixture with one person's reference sample over the population database.
The true allele results from the contact swabbings from the jacket, what were they?
The contact swabbings from the jacket contained a mixture of at least 3 individuals. A match was identified between the major evidence genotype from the contact swabbings from the blue jacket and Jose Antonio Ibarra. A match between the contact swabbings from the jacket and Jose Ibarra is approximately 100 trillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
How many zeros are in 100 trillion?
Billion is 9, trillion is 12, and then it's 100, so it's 14.
What was the results for the other person in the mixture?
Match was identified between a major second major evidence genotype and Laken Riley. That match is approximately 8 quadrillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And you said there were at least, you said how many people in the mixture?
At least 3.
Were you able to make a conclusion regarding other individuals that might be present in the jacket? And I guess specifically, did you compare the known DNA of Jose Ibarra to see if he was present in that mixture?
Yes, I did, because our comparisons are for unrelated individuals. I went ahead and did the comparison to the 2 brothers.
Okay, and what were your results first for Jose Ibarra? Was he present in that mixture?
No, he was not present in the major contributors. The match is approximately 60 quadrillion times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population.
And so does that mean he was excluded?
Yes.
What about Diego Ibarra? Did you look to see if he was in that mixture?
For Diego Ibarra and the profile from the contact swabbings from the blue jacket, he was approximately 10 million times less probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. For this match likelihood ratio, there is a 5.36% chance of a false exclusion, and that is based on our validation data.
Was Diego excluded?
Yes, he was.
Were your true allele results for the jacket concordant or consistent with your traditional DNA results for the jacket?
They were different samples, but yes.
The state, Michael, is doing a really good job of eliminating other possible suspects, even before we're in the defense case, though.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a problem when we talk about appealable issues. I don't think the defense has objected, so I don't know if they've saved it for appeal.
They haven't objected a whole lot.
They haven't objected a whole lot. Again, I don't know about pretrial, but at the end of the day, you're not supposed to use that until the rebuttal case when the defense puts forth this idea that it's someone else. You can't just vitiate their defense before they even start. That's unconstitutional.
And that's the case whether it's jury or judge trial.
Judge or judge, that the rules will remain the same.
This is the Court TV podcast.
Back now to the murder of Laken Riley trial out of Athens, Georgia.
Defendant Jose Ibarra is accused of killing the 22-year-old nursing student earlier this year.
Now, Laken Riley was on a morning jog along a popular trail on the University of Georgia's campus when prosecutors say Ibarra attacked her, allegedly beating her with a rock, strangling her, and then ultimately killing her.
All right, let's get you back into court now, where a crime scene lab scientist is on direct examination by the state. Let's head back in.
yes.
The same two people?
Correct.
I had a very awkwardly worded question. Thank you. It was the same two people, both traditional and true allele?
Yes.
All right. Moving on then to gloves, black gloves. Can you tell me, did you have the opportunity to test some black gloves and do DNA testing on those, and what item number would that be for you for the GBI?
I tested swabbings as well as contact swabbings from 3 black gloves. The black gloves are item 2A, 2B, and 2C. The swabbings and contact swabbings were items 6 through item 11.
What were your results?
Each one?
Yes, please. Sorry. You can start with 2A.
2A. The contact swabbings from the black glove contains the DNA profile of at least 2 individuals. The partial major profile matched Laken Riley. The frequency of the partial major profile from the contact swabbings from the black glove, 2A, item 7, is approximately 1 in 10 octillion individuals in the population. And due to limited data, I could not make any conclusions about the minor contributor, so that was, the data was sent to true allele testing.
Okay. And what were the true allele results?
For the, sorry. 2A, item 7, at least 2 individuals. Again, it matched Laken Riley. This time it was 10 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. And due to limited data, we still cannot make any conclusions about the minor contributor. When a contributor is less than 4% of the overall mixture, we don't make any conclusions based on our validation.
So you're not able to tell who else is there?
Correct.
Next item, which would be glove 2B. Same question, same format.
The next one to be item 8. Again, on this one, there was a DNA profile of 1 individual. That profile matched Laken Riley, and the probability was 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
So on one of the gloves, which was 2B, it's just Laken Riley.
Correct.
2C.
2C. Or 2B, item 9.
Yes. The third glove.
Thought we were still on 2B.
I thought we finished 2B. It was just Laken Riley?
2B, item 9 was at least 1 individual, and it matched Laken Riley with the same, with 1 in 500 octillion individuals, but there was 1 additional genetic allele marker. But based on our policy, we couldn't make any conclusions about this 1 marker.
So would that be inconclusive as well?
For the minor contributor, yes.
Okay. All right. And 2C?
2C, item 11, is at least 2 individuals. The major contributor to this profile from the contact swabbings 2C from the gloves is Laken Riley, approximately 1 in 500 octillion individuals.
And were you able to make any kind of conclusions about anyone else in that one?
Again, due to limited data, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributors, so it also went to true allele testing.
And what were your true allele results?
2C, item 11, again, a mixture of 2 individuals, at least 2 individuals. The major contributor was Laken Riley, 10 octillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. And again, due to limited data, being below 5% mixture ratio, mixture contribution, no conclusions could be made about the minor contributor.
Did you test the fingernails of Laken Riley?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
The fingernails were tested for traditional DNA as well as for YSTRs in Trullo.
What were Laken Riley's fingernails, her item number, and your unique item number for her case number?
Fingernail clippings from the right hand, item 18A, the swabbings was item 42. The swabbings from the left hand fingernails were item 18B. The swabbings were item 43.
Okay. So did you look at both the left
All
hand
right,
and
let's bring in our guest. Still with us, criminal defense attorney Jeffrey Wolf. Jeffrey, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. And I got to ask you, you know, we've seen this many times. We've done this many times. What is your philosophy for this type of witness in terms of making this palatable for the jury? Because as I'm listening, and as I said, we've done this, and it's still difficult for me to quite, I got to look back at the notes and say, what did she say about that octillion, and what does that really mean? I mean, this stuff is not easy to follow.
Yeah, I mean, it is never easy to follow, right? And we are interested parties. We are legal observers who actually enjoy this stuff, and we still sit here and sometimes feel our eyes droop a little bit. So you can imagine what a jury would be doing with this. Luckily, in this case, we're looking at a court trial, so we have a judge there who hopefully is diligently taking notes, which is what you hope jurors are doing when they're watching stuff like this, but they often are not. And so what you want to do as a trial attorney when you have stuff like this is you want to highlight the portions of the testimony that are important by trying to basically, without being too theatrical, using your voice to highlight a portion of the case that is more important. And then you want to be taking your own notes during the testimony so that you can come back in closing and redraw their attention to that witness and redraw their attention to the parts of that testimony that were important, because they're going to remember the witness and they're going to remember the DNA evidence that came in. And then you want to bring their attention back to the piece of it that was important, using an accurate description of it so that you don't get an objection that you've misstated the evidence.
And we're hitting the pause button on this testimony, but we're inching closer to that defense case. What kind of a defense would you put on? Who would you call?
Well, it would seem that the best thing that they can do for themselves is try and bring somebody on that can best explain to the jury why this DNA evidence is not as reliable as the state is making it seem. Because anybody that tries DNA cases like I do can tell you that this YSTR testing, this extra step that they're having to take when they have minuscule amounts of male DNA, is very unreliable. It is going into the ghost in the machine of DNA testing and going into these minuscule amounts of male DNA and pulling out what can best be described as something that the machine itself and its own documentation will say is a potential error. Will say that are alleles and markers of DNA that may be an error in the machine. And so hopefully the defense has their own expert that's going to come in and explain to the jury that what the state's DNA expert is presenting as this is a reliable match to Mr. Ibarra is actually potentially just an error in numbers that the machine is spitting out, because that's what this stuff really is. And it's not really as scientifically validated as they're saying it is. This is not something that goes all the way back to the OJ trial when DNA was first made aware of in the general sphere of people following court cases. This is stuff that is very new. This is stuff that is very inaccurate and stuff that the state's own expert is not as educated in as she's presenting to the jury that she is.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And one of the things they're going to mention for sure is that in most instances, you would think that a machine would be more reliable than a person. But under these circumstances, as Jeff mentioned, that's really not the case.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Coming to you live from Athens, Georgia, where we are covering the Jose Ibarra murder case. This is the 26-year-old defendant, and his name is Jose Ibarra. He's been sitting inside that courtroom throughout this entire case. Not really any emotions from him. The prosecution says that Ibarra put on a black hat, a jacket, and black disposable gloves to go hunting for females on the University of Georgia campus. Ibarra is accused of killing 22-year-old Laken Riley. Let's get you back into the courtroom now. The next witness is the Associate Medical Examiner for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Let's go back in.
Were you the doctor that performed an autopsy on an individual named Laken Riley?
Yes, I was.
Would you tell the court, please, on what day and what time did you perform that autopsy?
On February 23rd at approximately 8:35 a.m.
Where was that autopsy performed?
At the GBI headquarters in Decatur, Georgia.
When you performed the autopsy on Laken Riley, did you photograph it?
Photographs were taken under my direction by our forensic photographer.
Thank you. And did you also produce a report summarizing your findings?
I did, yes.
And what is the unique case number that was assigned to Laken Riley? And did you use that unique case number in the photographs and in your report?
Yes, that unique case number was used throughout. May I refer to my report so I don't misstate the case number?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
While she's looking at that, let me go ahead and make an announcement to the media that there will not be any photographs or any depiction of autopsy evidence going forward.
The case number is 2024-1005-107.
And may I approach the witness, Your Honor? I'm sorry, I'm going to approach the witness and I'm going to hand you a series of photographs. And what we have done, Your Honor, is made multiple copies of the photographs. The defense counsel has some at their table so that they can follow along. I'm handing Dr. DiMarco states 299 through 218. I'm going to ask if she recognizes those, and I'm going to have an extra copy for the court so that she can talk about a photo by number, and everybody can see it at the same time.
Okay.
Without having the need to publish the photos.
I understand. But they haven't been admitted yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'm going to leave them right here.
Thank you,
so
sir.
they are.
Yes.
Okay.
I said that. Oh, 299 to 318. Do you recognize states 299 to 318?
Yes, I do.
What are they?
These are the photographs that were taken at the time of autopsy.
Of Laken Riley?
Correct.
And her belongings? Or items that came in with her body, sorry.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
The state would, no, do they fairly and accurately depict Laken Riley and her body as you saw it on February 23rd of 2024?
Yes, they do.
State would move to admit states 299 to 318.
No objection.
They're admitted.
And in lieu of publishing them over the Elmo, Your Honor, if you could take those, thank you, for the court. So let's start first with, could you tell the court in what condition did you receive Laken Riley's body?
Laken Riley was received to our office in a body bag with identifying tags on the zippers of the external surface.
And is that what we see in states 299?
Correct.
Okay. And in states 299, do you see that unique case number that you just read to us?
Yes.
States 300, could you tell us what we're looking at there?
Following the photographs that are taken of the tags on the bag, we will take as, quote unquote, as is photographs. So as we receive the body, we will take photos how they come in. And that is photos 300 through 302.
So I want to talk to you about the condition of her body. First of all, were her hands bagged?
Yes.
And do you see those bags in states 300?
Yes, and 301.
301. And what other, could you describe her body in terms of how was she clothed and what, if any, other items you saw around her hair?
She came in wearing pants, undergarments, as well as shoes and socks. She had a necklace on her neck as well. There was a hair tie in her hair, as well as admixed leaves and twigs, vegetative debris.
And are those items depicted in states 300? That is the vegetative debris. Do you see it at the top of states 300?
Yes.
In her hair?
Yes.
All right. And then moving to states 302, does that depict her bottom part of her clothing, her leggings, and her shoes?
Correct.
All right. Could you please describe Laken Riley in terms of age, height, and weight?
May I refer to my report for height and weight, just so that I'm accurate? She was 22-year-old female, 64 inches or 5'4", and 143 pounds.
Did you observe any injuries to Laken Riley?
I did.
Can you globally describe them, and then we'll cover them in more detail? Globally describe the injuries that you saw, just in general terms.
So Laken exhibited blunt force head trauma as well as signs of asphyxia.
What is asphyxia?
Asphyxia is essentially the inability to deliver oxygen to your tissues and cells.
And what types of actions can cause asphyxia? Where do you see asphyxial deaths?
Asphyxial deaths can be seen in hangings, which are ligature strangulation. They can be seen in manual strangulation, as well as neck compression, either by somebody using their arm or doing an arm bar or chokehold or something like that.
And at times, as a medical examiner, are you able to determine what type of asphyxia caused or contributed to a victim's death?
In cases where we have good autopsy findings that would allow us to categorize them into one of those areas, we can.
And in this particular case with Laken Riley, were you able to determine what type of asphyxia you saw?
I was not able to categorize it.
So how did you categorize it in your report then, or how did you characterize it?
I just refer to it as asphyxia, not otherwise specified.
So it could be manual strangulation, but you just don't have enough findings to say that.
Correct.
Could be compression?
Correct.
Okay. So you told us the global injuries. I want to start first with Laken's face and head, and then move down the rest of her body, if you could.
Okay.
So we're looking at states 303. Could you tell the court what we're looking at there?
303 is what we call our quote-unquote ID shot. So we take this for every case where we put the case number under the individual's face and take this photograph.
Do you see any injuries to Laken's face?
Yes.
What are those injuries? Please, can you describe them for us?
She has a combination of abrasions, which are scrapes, as well as contusions, which is just the fancy medical way of saying a bruise, so bleeding under the skin, as well as lacerations. Lacerations, as opposed to an abrasion just being a scrape of the skin, a laceration is a defect of the skin and the tissue immediately underlying it.
States 304, what are we looking at there?
This is another photograph of her face with a little bit of a closer view, as well as more exposure of the injuries to the left side of her head.
And can you see in states 304 her neck?
Yes.
And did you observe any injuries to her neck? And if you did, could you please describe them for us?
Yes. On external exam, she had approximately 1-inch cluster of small abrasions on the left side of her neck.
And what can cause abrasions?
Abrasions are a form of blunt force trauma.
States 305, what does that depict?
In this photograph, we have shaved away some of the hair on the left side of the scalp so that we can better see this cluster of lacerations that are on the left side of the scalp. In addition to these lacerations, there are associated areas of contusions, which is that red bruising that is around the lacerations, as well as some abrasions associated with them as well.
What is a laceration?
A laceration is a form of blunt force trauma in that the skin and the tissue underneath the skin are separated.
Did you notice any injuries? You told us the lacerations. I'm going to ask you to describe them first. If you could describe for us the most severe injury that you saw to the left side of her head first, and then I'll ask you to describe the other lacerations.
The largest laceration was over 1 inch in greatest dimension, and you can see it associated with a defect of the underlying skull.
And when you say a defect in the underlying skull, what do you mean?
A fracture.
So did she have a skull fracture?
Yes.
How did you describe that skull fracture, or how would you describe it?
It is a complex displaced fracture of the left calvarium.
What does that mean?
It is a segment of her skull on the left side is displaced from its usual anatomic location.
And displaced in what way?
Displaced into the calvarium.
Okay, so into her skull.
Correct.
There is a part of her skull missing that's been displaced inside her head. Is that a way of saying it?
It's there, yeah. It's just displaced. Yep, into the skull.
Oh, into her skull. All right. And you told us how long it was. Is that what you described in 1 inch plus?
The largest dimension, I could refer my report for the exact. I know it was over an inch. It is 1 13/16 of an inch, so just under 2.
And is that the wound that we're talking about, the skull fracture, is that the one in the center of 305, which would be the largest wound that we see in that photograph?
Correct.
And how deep was that wound?
If you are measuring from the outer table of the skull, it was 1/4 of an inch.
And would you expect that wound to cause Laken Riley to bleed?
Yes.
And that wound itself, this skull fracture, is that, or could that be a fatal wound to Laken Riley?
It could be fatal.
Explain to us why and how.
Well, the wound, as you've mentioned, caused a displacement of the skull into the brain. In addition, underneath the wound, there was some subarachnoid hemorrhage. So essentially, there's a coating around the brain. Right under that coating, there was a little bit of hemorrhage associated with it as well. And like was mentioned, there was bleeding under the scalp associated with this injury and associated with that laceration.
And why could that be fatal to a person?
It essentially is causing trauma to the brain.
Did you observe any other lacerations to the left side of her head?
Yes.
How many did you observe?
There were 8 in total.
And if you could go through with us, do we see them in State's Exhibit 305, the others?
Yes.
Okay. And could you describe them as you describe, how would you describe the other 8?
They ranged in size from 1/4 of an inch to the largest wound that was over an inch. Some of them were curvilinear or linear, whereas others had a more irregular shape to them.
What type of, you said the lacerations are blunt force trauma?
Correct.
Is a rock a blunt surface?
It can be, yes.
And are the injuries that you see in States 305 consistent with a rock?
They could be consistent with a rock.
On the left side of her head, we're still on States 305. Could you tell us what, if any, injuries did you observe to her ear on the left side?
She also had a contusion or a bruise to the helix of her ear, as well as an associated abrasion in that area.
And the helix of the ear, could you just tell us for the record, what part of the ear is that?
It's, my apologies, it's the upper earlobe.
There kind of where my hand is right now?
Yes.
All right, on the left upper top of the earlobe. All right. And what type of injury did you say that was?
A contusion with an associated abrasion.
And is a contusion also a way of saying a bruise?
Yes.
All right. And it states 306, if you could flip the photo for us. What are we looking at there in states 306?
This is just another view a little bit further away, showing all the injuries to the left side of her head and neck.
So a complete photo of the 8 lacerations that you discussed?
Yes.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.